the missing childhood friend. A group of 5 friends gathered in an old wooden house on the outskirts of their hometown, the place where they spent their childhood. The house stood on a small hill, surrounded by dense forest, in silence and darkness that neither passing cars nor the sounds of the city could disturb. Here, among the faded walls smelling of dampness and time, something strange began. It was early autumn. The air was cool, and the evening shadows were long in the twilight. The friends sat in the living room, reminiscing about their school days, their evening walks, and the times when the world was simple and full of promise. But underneath all these stories, there was always something dark, the memory of someone who was no longer with them. Igor, their best friend, disappeared when they were 10 years old. He disappeared one evening when they were all playing near the river in an abandoned park. None of them could remember exactly what happened. Some said that he simply walked away towards the forest. Others, that someone called out to him from behind the trees. But the fact remained. Igor had disappeared without a trace. Despite searching, the police were unable to find him, his tracks, or any clues. Years passed, but the memory of this incident was still painful and strange for them. No one could explain what had happened, and that is why this meeting became important for each of them. They decided to get together again and try to remember what happened on that fateful evening. Anton, the leader of the company and the one who was most worried about Igor's disappearance, started the conversation. "I've thought about this for a long time. We were all children then, and perhaps we didn't understand everything that was happening. But what if Igor didn't just disappear? What if something different happened to him?" He looked around at everyone, as if waiting for confirmation of his suspicions. No one laughed or denied his words. Since Igor had disappeared, each of them had a strange feeling that it had all been no accident. There were moments that haunted them, strange dreams, vague memories, and, most importantly, the feeling that Igor had never really left. Marina, the quietest of the group, sighed nervously and said, "I've been having the same dream for several years now. Igor stands near the forest and then disappears into the fog. I try to catch up with him, but every time I get closer, he turns around, and his face, it's not what it was before. It's not Igor. It's something else. Something scary." "Well, these aren't just dreams," Sergei said, rubbing his hands nervously. "You know, after he disappeared, I went to study in another city. But ever since I came back here, I've always had the feeling that he's nearby. Sometimes I feel his gaze behind my back. Sometimes it seems to me that he's about to enter the room. And I've felt it too, more than once. For the last couple of weeks, I've been seeing him in crowds, or thinking I have. He's standing in the distance watching me, and when I try to get closer, he's gone, like he was never there." Silence fell over the company. At that moment, it became clear to each of them that Igor's disappearance was not just an old memory to be forgotten. It was something more, something that had haunted them all these years, but they could not fully comprehend it. An hour passed. The conversations flowed from one topic to another, but they all came back to one thing: that strange night when Igor disappeared. Half-empty glasses stood on the table, candles created a dim light, casting long shadows on the walls. No one could shake the feeling that they were being watched. They tried to attribute it to memories and the tension of the conversation, but the further the night went, the more obvious it became. Something was wrong. Marina stood up to close the window and froze for a moment. Outside, in the darkness, she saw a figure. It was a boy, or rather someone who looked very much like Igor, only he was the same as everyone remembered him, 10 years old with the same old t-shirt and sneakers. But his face was gloomy and dull, as if all the life had gone out of him. "Oh God, it's him!" she cried, stepping back from the window. Everyone ran up, but the figure had already disappeared into the darkness. Sergei was the first to run out into the street. The others followed him. They walked around the house, examining the dark forest and the street, but found no traces. But each of them knew it was Igor, or someone who looked like him. They returned to the house, confused and scared. They all suddenly realized that the stories of his disappearance were not just memories. Igor really was back, but something was wrong. All this time they had been trying to forget him, but it seemed he had not forgotten them, or whatever had taken his form had not forgotten. As the night wore on, the atmosphere in the house grew increasingly oppressive. Anton noticed the candles flickering with a strange, uneven light and felt a cold air seeping into the room. Something had changed, as if Igor's presence was creeping deeper into their world. Then there was a knock at the door. Everyone froze. The door was closed and no one was expecting guests. Sergei was the first to come up. When he opened the door, no one was there, but there was a strange vibration in the air, as if something had passed by. Marina suddenly screamed, pointing to the corner of the room. There, in the darkness, was a shadow. It was faint, but it seemed familiar. The shadow moved forward, and everyone could see Igor's face, cold, dead, with empty eyes. "Why have you forgotten me?" came a whisper that echoed in the silence. The friends retreated, panicked, but something about the figure held them in place. It did not move, but its presence filled the room with a terror that could not be described. This was not the Igor they knew. The creature before them was something else, something that had returned from the depths of the past to claim its own. "I've been waiting for you," said Igor's voice, which now sounded more like an eerie rustle. "All these years I've been there." The creature that had taken the form of their friend stepped forward, and they felt the cold penetrate to their bones. The room became dark, and the candles went out. In this darkness, they heard only Igor's whispers, which now sounded all around them. "You left me." With each word, his presence grew stronger, until they began to realize the truth. Igor had never returned. What stood before them was not their friend. It was something else, something that had taken his form, his memories, his pain. That night changed their lives forever.